Hi, welcome to the show. This today is the Stopping, Preventing, Reversing Diabetes show. It'll be on at 6:30 on Monday on Public Access TV, and I thank them for that. And this will be very interesting. I've been telling people for probably 10 years now to get a serum insulin test. I've tried to explain it. I think a lot of providers, doctors still don't order it, but it's in many books. But recently I found the man who really started pushing it a bit from St. Joe Hospital in Chicago. And his name is Joseph R. Kraft. Joseph R. Kraft. I encourage you to get this book, Amazon Books, and read it, because we ourselves, we have relatives that have type 2 diabetes, to which are attached 50 illnesses. They can, and what Dr. Kraft especially is saying, they can be avoided. That includes vascular disease, cancers, many different types of cancers. Dr. Kraft has said 99% of vascular disease, heart attacks, strokes, visual loss, loss of feeling, feet and hands, joints, are related to being diabetic. He is saying, if you say, grab your chest and had a heart attack and they bring you to the emergency room, that if you're not diabetic, they ran the wrong test. That's Dr. Kraft. I agree, because I've studied this. So what's the most important thing? The insulin assay. The insulin assay. Insulin test. So get a glucose tolerance test where you swallow 75 grams of sugar. Before you swallow it, have a fasting blood sugar. Okay? A fasting serum insulin, same thing at 1 hour. Fasting, 1 hour blood sugar, 1 hour insulin, 2 hour blood sugar, 2 hour insulin. Because many people have glucose tolerance tests, which I've noticed too, and they're normal, but they didn't run the serum insulin, so Dr. Kraft would say, you didn't get the right test. I was at Starbucks yesterday, and two people sitting in the next table who I could tell, my eyes know too much, were diabetic, a mother and a daughter, a beautiful daughter. And 3 times did I hear the word insulin, and I was reading this book. I couldn't help myself. I went over and said something. Fortunately, the mother knew who I was. She worked at the hospital. And we had a little conversation. And the daughter, it wasn't quite as big and looked significantly younger, had recently had a glucose tolerance test, and it was normal. The trouble is her doctor did not order serum insulin, so as far as Dr. Kraft and I are concerned, we don't know her diabetic status, but I know she's going to be diabetic. But she needs a serum insulin too, and she promised to get it, and I wrote it out for her. Okay, let's go through the history of diabetes in the insulin test. A little bit is outlined in this great book. Way back in 1925 or so, they came up with a glucose tolerance test where you swallow, at that time, 100 grams of sugar, and they checked it for 3 hours, I think, fasting, 1 hour, 2 hour, 3 hour. And that caught some people with diabetes, but it missed a lot of them too. The insulin test will catch most of them. What Dr. Kraft did is studying this. He studied 14,000 people, 14,438 and including children down to age 13, I think. And he does recommend that we study also children, okay? And the Yalo, Y-A-L-O, Berson, developed their radio immunoassay test of insulin. See, with them, we can now determine the serum insulin. I mean, that was very, very important. And I think it's around 1950 or so. Insulin, incidentally, was discovered 1923, okay, by Banting and Best. I think they're from Canada. And before that, a lot of people died. You had no insulin, and most of them resulted in death. They'd be intensive care, losing weight, to nothing. So insulin saved them. And before that, they were eating high-fat diet. Mm-hmm. Sugar's the booger and the hooker. Okay, and unfortunately, they stopped that way of eating and started permitting more carbohydrates. That was a mistake. If they continued the high-fat diet with the insulin, we'd have had less vascular disease. See what Dr. Kroger found out is that if you take a type 1 diabetic, that's no insulin, okay? And some died. He did a lot of autopsies, 3,000 autopsies. So he looked at the pathology, and he points out, too, we stopped doing autopsies around 1970s, yeah, only on gunshots and head injuries, which was a mistake, because we looked at the real pathology. And he found out the type 1 diabetics, the ones who needed insulin, no insulin, that died, had no vascular disease. Mm-hmm. Had no vascular disease, yeah. So you got to take insulin to get the disease. Do you see my point? Yeah. He did autopsy, found no evidence of it. So insulin itself also causes stiffening of the arteries, dementia, increased rates of cancer, increased arthritis. So insulin does a lot besides bringing sugar into the cell for energy that we need. Also, it opens up the door to the cell and allows fat in. Insulin is anabolic. Use a lot of insulin, you're going to gain weight. Use a lot of insulin, you're going to have vascular disease. You see my point? So to take as little insulin as possible by good diet and exercise habit, avoid sitting, get moving, take a walk every day, for example, will reduce the amount of insulin that you need, and you will have less vascular disease. It could be retinal disease, it could be impotency, it could be heart attacks, it could be strokes. So when insulin came along, clearly that was a huge thing, and started saving a lot of lives. Then eventually the glucose tolerance test came along, which helped more. But then in the early 70s, the glucose tolerance and insulin test came along, and that was even more helpful. Okay, and the development of nuclear studies, for example, especially with the insulin and everything, helped a great deal. And Dr. Kraft, for example, ran in 1973 ran 1,000 tolerance tests, glucose tolerance with insulin assay. 73, he did 1,000. 1974, he did 2,500 tolerance tests, and it was written up in the paper Chicago Tribune report on glucose insulin tolerance presentation, American Medical Association meeting. I mean, that was 74. You kind of wonder, why didn't they then recommend it all over the country? You know what I mean? Newsweek had an article in 1974, a new test for diabetes. Wake up, America. What happened? And in 1975, detection of diabetes mellitus in situ. So before the blood sugar is elevated, is diabetes in situ, okay, where the insulin started to raise up, indicating there's a problem. And then Kraft wrote another article in 75, 79, and glucose insulin tolerance testing for the prospective management of diabetes, atherosclerosis. That's the atherosclerosis in the small vessels, okay? And so he really led the path. And one was written in 2011 by Dr. Kraft. Earliest diagnosis of diabetes is not HbA1c. A lot of times they see people now that are screening diabetics, they order the HbA1c. That's 3 months. That is 3 months of blood sugar, okay? But that catches it late in the disease. That's not what you want. By that time, a lot of people are already partial blindness and numbness and advanced vascular disease. You want to catch it earlier. And this is what point I'm trying to drive home today. The government, public health, should be screaming that everybody gets this test, even children. Diabetes is tremendously increased in children today. We could catch them early on the path, have them lose a little bit of weight, do some little more exercise, okay? Get people moving. We could eliminate a tremendous amount of suffering from paralysis to strokes to blindness, and the healthcare bill in this country for probably cut in half. Don't believe me? Read these books. End of Diabetes, Dr. Joel Fuhrman. Goodbye Diabetes, Dr. Wes Youngberg. Esselstyn's books. Blood Sugar Solutions, Mark Hyman. It's all in those books. It's not just me here. Oh, okay. So, and Kraft was saying in 2009 that it's pretty much in the earlier stages, it's a silent disease. You don't have any symptoms except you get vascular disease going on, increased rates of cancer in your body. You just don't know it yet. Okay? So screening is the answer. Screening is the answer. And also, he did manage to work a lot with ENT specialists, and I have to compliment him because people with insulin problems have increased rates of tinnitus, vertigo, hearing problems. And they get involved with it more so than other specialists. So tinnitus, vertigo, hearing loss, a nice article published in 1998 related to elevated insulin and sugar. Yeah. And remember we mentioned the immunoassay of insulin. Around 1997 it came out. And it was very, helpful. And you might say, fasting blood sugar, what's normal? What is normal? For my reading, I'd say 85 or under. Don't accept 100. There's a pre-diabetes is 100, 126, and diabetes is 126. Blood sugar, no. You're way ahead in your disease. You get a normal blood sugar maybe around 85, but I'll add to that, normal serum insulin interests me. Okay, that's what interests me. Under 5 maybe, yeah. And if you took a glucose tolerance test and your serum insulin's over 40, you're diabetic. Okay, so. And he divides here normal glucose tolerance test in IGT pre, and then diabetes DMGT. That's how he looked at it. And so we indeed do have dynamic insulin patterns. I mean, there's a normal pattern with the insulin being the highest, usually about a half hour to an hour. 2 hours is half as high. But usually 1 hour, it can be around 60 units. At 2 hours, it should be 30 or so. If it's higher than that, you get diabetes. At 3 hours, it's around 12, 13. 4 hours between 0 and 10. 5 hours, it's less than 5. So this is the dynamic. See the graph, the dark thing over there. They studied it, so they know what a normal insulin graph could be. So, like at Starbucks the other day, where the patient is telling me she had a normal glucose tolerance test. I don't have diabetes, when I know her mother had it, and visually I wondered if she had it too, that I carefully wrote out for her to get the serum insulin. Don't live in denial and delusion, because you have it. You're going to get a number. It could be breast cancer, it could be blindness. These are complications of diabetes. It can be stroke, can be a heart attack, loss of memory, dementia. They may call it Alzheimer's disease when actually it's dementia from insulin elevation, thyroid disease, gum disease, teeth fall out. Queen Elizabeth had elevated blood sugars, and she had black teeth, for example. Heart disease, unannounced heart attacks. Half of heart attacks, you grab your chest and you die. That's half. No angina, nothing. Just go boom, and you're gone. And know the different patterns of men and women. Remember, women can have pain on the right side, some nausea, could be a heart attack. Keep that in mind. Renal disease, fatty liver, extremely common. It's going to be the most common operations in the future. And you can be a tophy, thin on the outside, but fat on the inside. The fats in your omentum and in your liver, these people are much more likely to have diabetes, increased rates of cancer. So it's very important. And genetics certainly play a part. If certain side of the family, they're all type 2 diabetic, certainly if your spouse, more likely to get diabetes. But genetics is only a knock on the door. It's what they're eating and where they're moving that determine whether it happens or not. And a lot of people don't want to change. But I think if they really knew, and amputations is a big from diabetes. Yeah, I mean, go to some places of worship and look around. And how many people in wheelchairs and they're missing a leg? I know a family where I think 5 people had extremities amputated, all preventable, and they're still not listening. I think living in delusion and denial, and I'm not being critical. I'm trying to avoid them having all these complications because it's serious. I mean, they can have the toes amputated, then the ankle, then the lower leg, then the upper leg, then the thighs. Occasionally I've seen it, and the arms too, and still refuse to change the habits. I think part of the reason is sugar is, nature designed it so that we would eat, okay? It's a quick fix. Yeah. Some people think sugar is more addictive than cigarettes. Some think it's more addictive than cocaine. Actually, the chemical difference between sugar and cocaine is 1 molecule. Yeah, I didn't know that till recently. How sad. Okay. So it makes us feel good. It's a quick fix. Instead of smoking or marijuana or whatever. I know of a patient, a person who's a good singer, went to a church. He was telling me about this because he wanted me to work him up for diabetes, and he was eating these little tiny donuts. You know how good they are. I've had them. You can't stop. So he ate 8 of them. Then he had a sugary drink, and he's a singer at the church. And during the middle of the beautiful voice, I mean, unbelievable singer, he passed out. I said, "What do you think happened, Dr. Cashman?" I said, "You had a glucose tolerance test." Instead of those 75 grams of sugar, he already ate it. And so we know he's diabetic, but and it's so common. Your eyes can really tell it. You get increased belly size, you're diabetic, unless you prove to me otherwise. That's not an insult at all. It's just gives you information. As part of metabolic syndrome is a belly measurement, is one of the things. And cancer is related to being diabetic too, yeah, especially breast cancer. If you smoke, drink alcohol, overweight, maybe a few toxins, may not need them, odds of diabetes go up like breast cancer go up 70%. 70% of breast cancer can be avoided. Yeah, the serum insulin is the one that helps cause cancer. Remember, it causes cell growth. Remember, it's anabolic. So if you have a cancer in your body, and Mark and Dr. Warrenberg, 1930s in Germany, discovered the sugar theory of cancer. It takes 13 molecules of sugar for a cancer cell. 13. Mm-hmm. Only one for us to make one ATP, one glucose. Okay. And we can make ATP. Oxygen make ATP. Okay. But cancer cells need 13. So cancer is a sugar feeder. So that's the reason you want to avoid this, because of increased rates of cancer associated with diabetes and vascular disease. The worst one, blindness, most common cause of blindness, is vascular disease. I tried to stimulate ophthalmologists, 2 of them specifically in this town, 10 years ago, for them to take great interest in diabetes because of what were they looking at? Retinal disease, visual loss. A friend of mine recently lost half his vision in one eye. And the ophthalmologist and the patient, they're still blind. Odds are, I tried to get him to get a serum insulin. He hasn't got it yet. I think he's living in denial. I'll get it when it was the next physical. If I were him, I'd have it tomorrow. Because then, a very intelligent guy, he could do something about it. Because I'm concerned that it might involve the other eye. This eye never did recover. They injected it a number of times, but it still has not recovered. So one of the first signs of type diabetes is retinal disease, is a common one, and numbness in the hands and numbness in the feet are quite common, early signs of diabetes. But you know already now that blood testing, low HDL, high LDL, elevated CRP, but the most important is glucose tolerance tests and some insulin. I want to know that you're not diabetic. And I would get this test every year. You can go on YouTube, Rudy Cashman, look at my other diabetes shows, so you get this ingrained in your mind so you know what to do. Do not accept type 2 diabetes. Just don't do it. Type 2 is where insulin can get the sugar into the cell, okay? And type 1 is where you have no insulin, which some people think is an autoimmune disease, but it's also partly related to drinking a lot of milk. Some is related to gluten, so you should have a gluten test. But milk has increased rates of diabetes associated with it, because cows' milk is for baby cows. Our body don't have the same proteins, same sugars, same carbohydrates, same fats that a cow has. It's just that industry convinced us. Read a book by Joe Keon, Whitewash. Once you read that, you won't be drinking milk. I've read it 3-4 times now. Very scientific, full of references. And but how do you drink some milk? Well, maybe some almond milk, for example, might be good for you if you need to drink some milk. But cow's milk is meant for babies' cows. The casein in milk, Dr. Colin Campbell, the China study, he says is the most carcinogenic chemical in the world. Yeah, I've read one of his books. Great book to read, China Study, Colin Campbell, where they studied a lot of the towns in China, and he put it together in a great book. And fatty liver, like I said, is a common complication of being overweight and being diabetic, and that causes increased rates of diabetes. So, even if you're thin, you can have fatty liver. Okay, but if you eat right, nutrient-dense way of eating. Let's talk about that in a minute. What am I saying? How to eat? Nutrient-dense food, which would be foods of color. Okay, fruit. Check your blood sugar if you're diabetic. You make sure about 80%. Maybe organic meat about 20%. You'll be rid of your diabetes about a month. Yeah. Most people will say to me, I didn't know you get rid of it. Yes, you can get rid of it. End of Diabetes, Dr. Furman, Goodbye Diabetes, Dr. Wes Youngberg, Dr. Esseltine, Cleveland Clinic, Mark Hyman, Blood Sugar Solutions. It's all in their books. I'm not just making this up. I've known that stuff for years. It was great to get a hold of Joseph Kraft's book, though, and I want you to look at his YouTube show. Such an honest individual, slow, quiet, speaking individual. He's dead now. He's 92 at the time. And this really is the origin of this recommendation, high recommendation of the serum insulin. And we have this show every week. We show this one twice in a row, 6:30, public access, Comcast 57. Look at my YouTube shows. You must participate in your health care. Okay, number one. Number two, it's nutrition. What you eat determines health. Number three, exercise, and that's important, spirituality. And thanks for watching. I do this because I love you, care about you. If you see me, give me a hug. Attend other TV shows or my lectures at Lutheran Hospital, or see me for free at the pharmacy by Concordia High every Friday morning. I see people there like I did today. And I do this. I'm a doctor, and I care about you. Namaste.